Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. We are continuing our series on the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. This, I believe, is our third class. We're going to be continuing with an idea that we introduced last week. I'd say the first class, if we could summarize it or get it down to a nutshell, it was a discussion of Israel being in the center of the world, geographically, religiously, economically, politically. That was, among many other things, that was the main theme. Last week, the main theme was this idea of Israel being a relatively tiny country, having such a wide variety of geographical areas, from snow-capped mountains to the Mediterranean, to a desert, to the lowest place on earth, the largest natural crater, to dolphins down in Eilat, and just springs and rivers and lakes, but everything in miniature. And that was our theme, and it was based on this idea that the letter Yud, which is the smallest of the letters, is referred to as the little that holds a lot. And we applied that to the land of Israel. That's it's the geographical reality of Israel. But tonight, I want to take that idea really to a whole different level, a whole other different dimension. One of the verses that we contemplated from the first class and revisited was that it's a land, Israel is a land that you will not eat bread in scarcity. But the way that it's written is, you will not eat bread in scarcity, you will lack nothing. This is a verse from Parshat Ekev. But if you read it a little bit differently and you put the punctuation, the last two words are Kol Bah. And so you could read it, you will not eat bread in scarcity, for everything is in it. Kol Bah. Everything is in it. So I want to take these two words, Kol Bah, and we're going to dive deep into its connection to the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. So in the same passage from Parshat Ekev, that's where we learned of the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael, and we spent half of the last class discussing the 7 fruits. And it ended with where it says, V'achalta, v'sevata, u'barachta. You will eat, you will be satisfied, and you will bless. And we learned already that this is, call it the headquarters of all blessings. And we learned that despite the fact that we say 100 blessings a day, the only one that actually is Torah mandated is this idea of blessing after you eat. From that, the rabbis learn the rationale for all of the other blessings, mostly coming before an action. This is coming in a certain way after an action. You eat, you're satisfied, and you bless. So the first thing I want to point out is the the two words that we're going to be dealing with tonight are Kol Bah. Chaf Lamed is Kol, Ba is Bet Hey. If you look at the Gematria of those two words, it equals 57. And in the blessing that we say today after eating bread, is remember the verse talked about eating bread, and it was the first of the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael is wheat. And so the first blessing when we bless after eating a meal with meat, with bread, is Baruch Atah Hashem Hazan et HaKol. Blessed are you, God, who provides for everyone. So interestingly enough, the word Zan, Hazan, you provide, Zan equals 57, equals Kol Bah. Everything is in it. So this is just a beautiful allusion, a hint to the connection of this very, very important blessing and the land, the 7 fruits, and the idea that everything is in it. Now, when we take the words Kol Bah, everything is in it, the word Kol equals 50. The word Bah equals 7. So we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to come into Eretz Yisrael. It's a whole story where he hit the rock instead of spoke to it. But later in Parshat Ve'etchanan, in the book of Deuteronomy, so we touched on this last week, that Moshe prayed 515 prayers to come into Eretz Yisrael. 515 prayers. So we can imagine Moshe Rabbeinu has been leading Israel for 40 years. He has spoken about Eretz Yisrael many times in the Torah, many times, especially the verse that says, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udavash, land flowing with milk and honey. So we can understand that Moshe Rabbeinu, after leading the people to the gate, to the entrance of Eretz Yisrael, wants to come in. He prays 515 prayers, but for really reasons only God knows, we can try to guess. God says you can't come into the land. But it's interesting that for all of the reasons that could be given, the Midrash points out more than anything, Moshe wanted to come into the land so he could fulfill what are called Mitzvot Tuluyot Ba'oretz, the mitzvot that are connected to the actual land. Now, in Eretz Yisrael, there's lots of mitzvot, but there's a whole body of mitzvot that are connected to the very land of Eretz Yisrael. And so the Midrash says that of all the reasons that we could think of Moshe wanting to come into the land, that is like the primary one that is given. He wanted to do the mitzvot in the land of Israel. So we're going to revisit this idea. But again, the numerical value of Kol is 50. Now, it says in the Gemara that Moshe, now, first of all, 50 is always connected to what are called the 50 gates of understanding. Chamishim Sharei Bina, the gates of understanding. And the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu reached the 49th level, but did not reach the 50th level. And we're told that the number 50, especially in the gates of understanding, represents a level that is, we'll call it supra-conscious. It's above logic. It's above normative wisdom. It is somewhat prophetic, high level of inspiration, intuition. In other words, it transcends the 49 lower levels. So we know that this idea of 50 is also associated with Shavuot, the day that the Torah is given at Mount Sinai. We count 7 times 7 weeks, which equals 49. And the 50th day is the giving of the Torah. So we know from the description of the giving of the Torah, it was a totally transcendental experience of the whole people, not just for individuals, for the entire people. As we've discussed many times, that all the dimensions merged together, the 7 heavens opened up. So the giving of the Torah in a certain way is the essence of the 50th gate. Nonetheless, the Gemara says that Moshe reached 49 levels, and it's almost hinting that a human being simply can't reach the 50th level. It's one beyond our reach. There's a beautiful Zohar that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, so he was able to talk to the souls of people who had departed this world. He was in contact with the upper worlds. And so in the Zohar, there are many conversations between the soul of Moshe and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So in one of these discussions, Moshe Rabbeinu, as it were, was bemoaning his fate that he did not reach the 50th level of understanding. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said to him, you're not correct. You did reach the 50th level, and it was in Ein HaSechel Shebelev, the essence of the mind in the heart. In other words, you are thinking that the only way to reach the 50th level is through the mind. And he said, actually, you really did reach the 50th level, but you didn't relate to it like that. You reached it through the inner dimension, the inner point of mind that is in the heart. And that's why the Tanya teaches all the time that the mind has to rule over the heart. Hamoach shalit ala lev. But the Baal Tanya says there are times that the mind must listen to the heart. It's not a fast rule that the mind has to rule over the heart. In general, that is true because the emotions are very, can be swayed, can be like a roller coaster. So the mind has to rule over the heart, but a lot of times in the most crucial moments of our life, we have to listen to the heart. And so that's what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai told him. So here we see that not only did Moshe Rabbeinu want to come into the land because he wanted to do the mitzvot, he also understood that the 50th gate of understanding can only be accessed in Eretz Yisrael. That's part of the, we'll call it the spiritual geography of the land, that there's something much greater than the physical dimension of the land of Israel. There's a spiritual dimension that is intimately connected with the physical land itself. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu wanting to keep the mitzvot that are connected to the land is because the land itself is a receptacle, is a vessel for spiritual reality. And that's why we have a saying from the sages, Ein Torah K'Torat Eretz Yisrael. There is no Torah like the Torah of the land of Israel. That the quality of the connection we make to Torah in Eretz Yisrael is qualitatively different. And they went as far as saying, Avira to Eretz Yisrael machkim. The air of Eretz Yisrael makes one wise. So here, if we're talking about geography, we're thinking of land, mountains, valleys, plains. But here it's even the air of Eretz Yisrael has a certain quality about it. Now, just as an aside, I'll mention that according to tradition, there's one other way to reach the 50th level of understanding, and that is through death. And so when we look in the Torah to see where is Moshe Rabbeinu buried, so the Torah points out that his burial place is not known until this day. We don't know where he is buried exactly. We know in general because it mentions the name of the mountain, Har Nevo. If you look at the word Nevo, it's Nun Bet Vav. The Nun is in this place. So in other words, Rashi tells us that Moshe died by the kiss of God. A very unique and blessed way to leave this world is what's called the kiss of God. And so it's said that at that moment, Moshe did reach the 50th level of understanding, the 50th gate. Har Nevo, Nun Bo. Here we're looking at Kol Bah. Bo is masculine, Ba is feminine. And this is something that we will look at further also, that when we relate to the land of Israel, it's always in the language of the feminine. Our relationship to the land is all of Israel is considered, in this context, male, masculine, and the land is feminine. So our love relationship with the land is between masculine and feminine. All of Israel is masculine, and our beloved is the land itself. In our relationship to God, it's just the opposite. God is, as it were, the masculine, and all of Israel is the feminine in relationship to God. It's all relative. Einstein did not discover the theory of relativity. It was taught in Kabbalah way before Einstein. The idea, it depends on what context you're speaking, how things line up. Okay, so now let's go a little bit deeper. And we're going to look at the word kol. Now, after Sarah dies and Avram buries her, So it says, Avram Zaken ba biyamim, Hashem berach et Avram bakol. Avram became elderly in wisdom, and Hashem blessed him with bakol, everything. So that's very reminiscent of Kol Bah. Everything is in it. And so there are different traditions. What does that verse mean? So one is this idea, he came into days, meaning that at that point, Avram had 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in the world to come. In other words, he had reached such a level, and a good part of it was that Sarah led the way. She was the first Jew to be buried, and she, in a certain way, opened up the gate to the world to come to Avram. That's why this verse comes after she is buried. Avram Zaken ba b'yamim, Hashem berach et Avram bakol. So here, bakol has 3 of the 4 letters of our words Kol Bah. So here we see something very deep, because Avram, he is the one who paved the way for the Jewish people for all eternity to inherit the land of Israel. Hashem blessed him bakol. Now you should know, it's very interesting. Rashi says, what does it mean, bakol? He brings the Gematria. The Gematria of bakol is 52, which is Gematria ben, a son. So this explanation is that Avram was blessed with having a son like Yitzchak. I mean, Yitzchak was already 37 years old at the time. But again, this idea, he was blessed through having a son like Yitzchak. But the other explanation is just the opposite. Is bakol is that he had a daughter, and her name was Bakol. So it's interesting that one of the this is 50 years ago, one of the young women, it was named Bakol. So there's this idea, one opinion is it was a ben, a male child, and the other one was it was a female child. But we're looking at it a different, that when it says he was blessed with everything, means he was blessed to be the one to lead all of Israel into the land of Israel. Again, Bakol is 3 of the 4 letters of Kol Bah. So this is very beautiful. Now look at this incredible connection. How did Avram come to Eretz Yisrael? What brought him to Eretz Yisrael? This is when God said to him, Lech-Lecha ma'artzecha, go out of your land and from your birthplace and your father's house, El ha'oretz asher areka, until the land that I will show you. Look at the word Lech-Lecha. Lech, if you just switch the letters, is Kol Bah. So this is an amazing connection. When God said Lech-Lecha, like I said, we're told that Lech-Lecha, the simple understanding is go for yourself. And then in the Torah, God gives reasons. It will be good for you to go, Avram. It'll be good for you. But the other explanation of Kabbalah and Chassidut that everyone quotes is Lech-Lecha means go to yourself. In other words, a dual journey here, one into the outer world and one that has to go inward. And so, again, if you take Lech and you turn it around, it's Kol. So in a certain way, God was already hinting everything is in Eretz Yisrael. Everything is in Eretz Yisrael. Everything you could want or imagine is in this very, very small place called Eretz Yisrael. Now, if you take the letters of Ba, Kala, the bride. So as I said before, when it says Kol Bah, this is teaching us that Eretz Yisrael is the feminine energy. The earth itself is feminine. That's why earth is called Adamah. And Eretz is also a feminine word. So the two words for land, earth, dirt, soil, they're both feminine. And so, of course, in the world, we have this idea of Mother Earth, but we relate to that in a very deep level. So again, Kol Bah is the bride. And that is our deep connection. So going back to, we started this whole thing that Kol Bah equals Zan. God providing for us, Zan et HaKol, the first blessing after eating bread. In that blessing, after we eat bread, towards the end, we mention Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we say, Bakol, Mikol, Kol. Bakol, we just discussed with Avram. Avram Zakein, Ba B'Yamim, Hashem Be'erach et Avram Bakol. Mikol is when Yitzchak tells Esav, go out and get me some meat and bring some meat and wine and I will bless you. So when he tells him to go out and find this venison, he says Mikol. And then Yaakov, when he meets Esav after 20 years, and he wants to give him gifts. And Esav says, no, I don't need your gifts. I have a lot. Yeshli Rav, I have a lot. And Yaakov responded, Yeshli Kol. I have everything. What do we call the land of Israel? Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov's name is changed to Yisrael. So he says, I have everything. Everything is here in Eretz Yisrael. Excuse me. Okay, so to sum this up, what we're seeing here, of course, this is all in the context of trying to understand the spiritual geography of Eretz Yisrael. So like I said before, one of the most important ideas is the centricity of Israel. As we said, geographically, economically, politically, economically, religiously. And the second major theme that we're delving into here is the idea of what does it mean, the little that holds a lot? Why is Israel this tiny little country? In other words, if God wanted the Torah to spread to the whole world, wanted the knowledge of one God spread to the whole world, and he wanted a people that would do this, why not take Avram to this huge territory, and even more to a territory that would not have to be fought over? These are great mysteries. Nonetheless, God gave him Eretz Yisrael. God chose Eretz Yisrael. That's why it says, Ela Oretz Asher Areka, to the land that I will show you. God had chosen Eretz Yisrael, particularly for Avram and the Jewish people. So there's obviously a tremendous secret here of Eretz Yisrael being so small, and yet this is from the place that the knowledge and the belief in one God spreads to the whole world. So now we're going to take what we've set up to now to even a deeper level. And that is, when I just said, the idea of Eretz Yisrael being receptive, being the feminine. So we talk about in Kabbalah and Chassidut all the time about lights and vessels, or and Keli. Lights and vessels. This is used extensively in explaining just about everything. Comes down to these ideas of lights and vessels. And so when we look at the word for vessel, so the first two letters are the exact same two letters of Kol Bah. Everything is in it. Because the word for vessel is Kli. Chaf Lamed Yud. Kli. So here we're understanding Eretz Yisrael is the vessel for God's light, God's wisdom, God's knowledge, and the very purpose of creation. As I mentioned to everyone already, there are certain areas that I'm not going into in any depth, because we have a whole other series on YouTube that anyone can get called The Holiness of the Land of Israel. 4 classes. And as I made clear in the beginning, my intention of giving this series is, when we're done, to take this series and put it together with that series and create another book. So I'm not revisiting areas that we covered in a previous series to this group. It was approximately 2 years ago that we did this series on the holiness of the land of Israel. So the word for vessel is Kli, 2 of the letters of Kol Bah. And that's the idea. The idea is Eretz Yisrael is the vessel of the holiness that will eventually spread to the whole world. But let's now look at the word Kli. Kli is the word Kol, 50, and the letter Yud. Now, what have we said about the letter Yud already? It's the little that holds a lot. So talking about Eretz Yisrael being the Kli puts together the idea it has everything, but it has everything in a very small space. Kli, now I see some of you are taking notes. I would recommend greatly for the next 10, 15 minutes, if you want to follow this, you might want to jot this down. You can do it now or when you listen to the class again, or some of this might go into one ear and out the other. But what we're going to do is we're going to see an incredible process of letters and numerical values that teach us incredible things. So again, the idea of a vessel is it becomes the place where the yud can be held. The yud is held by the kol. The little that holds a lot is the kli itself. But the yud, of course, is the first letter of God's four-letter name. And this represents, in a certain way, the light within the vessel. Now, kli equals 60. Chaf is 20, lamed is 30, yud is 10, together 60. We have a very, very important concept in Jewish law called batel b'shishim, that in the classic example is that if you're making a meat cholent and you and by accident a drop of milk falls into your fleishik cholent, if the quantity of the milk is less than 1 in 60, it becomes nullified. That's what's called batel b'shishim, nullified in 60. If it's more than 1 in 60, the entire cholent becomes unedible. It becomes treif. So this idea of 1 in 60. So there's a word that represents 1 in 60. And that's the word ayin, nothingness. The Ein Sof. Aleph, Yud, Nun. Yud and Nun equals 60. The Aleph equals 1. So here, the Aleph in the Kli. The Aleph is the light of Hashem. The first letter of Or, light, is an Aleph. But light needs a vessel. Without a vessel, light dissipates. Its effect fades away. You need a vessel to hold the light. Now, when you take the word ayin, which is again, Aleph is 1 and 60. And again, Kli equals 60. And you switch the letters, you get the word ani. I, me, ego. So this is a classic example of the same letters when they're permuted having the opposite meanings. Ani means ego. Ego, by the way, it's not evil in itself. It's just when it's bloated ego, it becomes problematic. But God gave us an ego in order to act in this world. But we have to learn to nullify our ego to the will of Hashem. So that's the secret of this word ayin. And again, we're like taking steps here. Kli is 60. And you add what's called the kolel, so then you have 61, and then you have this idea of ayin and ani. Now, if you take the word ayin, which means nothing, nothingness, but as we've learned many times, this nothingness is the womb of everything. When we say yesh mi ayin, something from nothing, it's not nothing in the sense of nothing. It's really the ultimate something. Yesh mi ayin, all something comes from what we call nothing. So when you look at the word for infinity, it's Ein Sof, which literally means without, or nothingness without end. Sof means end, endless, without end, no end. But here we have a very deep understanding of the relationship between spiritual and physical. And the reason I'm doing all of this, because we have to understand the physical qualities of the land of Israel. The physical geography is based on understanding the spiritual content of the physical world in general, and especially of Eretz Yisrael. So if you take the two words Ein Sof, so Ein, you could read it Ein within the Sof. Now, what does that mean? That means that this world, in the words of the Tanya, this world, Olam Asiyah, is the lowest of all worlds. The lowest of all worlds. All the other worlds are contained in potential in this world. But there is no world lower than this. That's what physicality is. And yet we know that physicality holds spiritual potential, just like matter holds energy. In fact, matter is energy. Physicality is spirituality. So the Ein Sof means that God's infinite light is also the secret of physicality. It is endowed within and clothed within physicality, and especially Eretz Yisrael. Now let's look at the word Sof. Sof equals 146. So what other word has the Gematria of 146? The word Olam. So now we can understand better when I say Ein Sof. The Ein is within the world. The light of Hashem is within the physical and the material. So now let's go back to the word Kli, vessel. Again, Kli equals 60. What is the Kli of Hashem? So Kli equals 60. Yud Ke Vav Ke, the four-letter name of God, the essential name of God, equals 26. 60 and 26 equals 86. It should ring bells in people's minds. 86 equals the name Elohim. So look what we have here. What is the vessel for Hashem? Elohim. Elohim equals Hateva. Remember, I told you it would be good if people wrote this down and you can look at it afterwards. Hateva means the all-encompassing word for nature. So again, we have the idea that the vessel for transcendent light of Yud Ke Vav Ke is in Elohim, which is connected to nature, is the revelation of God within nature. So now let's go one other step. What is the Kli of Elohim? Kli equals 60. Elohim equals 86. What is 60 and 86 together? 146. Olam. I hope everyone sees where I'm going with this. What I'm trying to explain here, this was a little bit complicated with the letters and the numbers, but there's a very, very fundamental understanding of the world that we live in, our relationship to the world, and ultimately the secret of the spiritual geography of Eretz Yisrael, and the very purpose of this being such a small land. Is, remember, Kli is a yud within the everything, but within the vessel. And so Eretz Yisrael is the most concentrated, just like the yud is called the little that holds a lot. It's the smallest letter, but in a sense, it holds everything. That is the speck of, we're going to call it matter, but we don't know what it was, of the Big Bang. This infinitely small speck which expanded to billions, hundreds of billions actually, of galaxies. So Eretz Yisrael, the secret of the spiritual geography of the land of Israel being such a small country, is because everything is in it, Kol Bah, and not just from a physical point of view. We already pointed out, just again, geographically, it has mountains, it has valleys, it has rivers, it has lakes, it has seas, it has all these different animals, it has a snow-capped mountain, it has burning deserts, it has everything. But that's just the physical manifestation of the much deeper spiritual reality behind the little that holds a lot. And so here we see that Eretz Yisrael is the Kli for God's light. So as I said in the beginning, that we're taking this to a whole different level. But we didn't call this series the spiritual geography of the land of Israel for nothing. In other words, in future classes, it's true, we are going to be spending more time dealing with the actual physical descriptions of the land, the realities of the land, and also their hidden meanings. But in this class, I wanted to delve as deep as I could into the spiritual underpinnings of the land of Israel. Now, in the Sefer Yetzirah, and it's one of my favorite passages in Sefer Yetzirah, it says, Na'utz sofan b'techilatan, v'b'techilatan b'sofan. The end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning in the end. So, as far as the letters go, if you say something that Na'ut sofan, so the first letter of the word end, sofan, is a samach, which is a circle. And this is already the idea of the passage, that the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning in the end. So the only shape that we have with that is, in a certain way, it's symbolic of, is a circle. And that, of course, is the letter samach. And the samach equals 60. The Gematria of Kli. So here we see that, and here I'll mention a Rashi that I already did in the series on the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. But since I brought this up, in Lecha Dodi, that we sing every Shabbos evening to usher in the Shabbat. So, Lecha Dodi, let us go, my beloved, Likrat Kala, to greet the bride. Pnei Shabbat, the face of Shabbat, Nikabbalah, we will receive. So let's just understand what that means. Lecha Dodi is we're speaking to God. God is the Dodi. Lecha Dodi, come, my beloved. Likrat Kala, let us greet the bride. Pnei Shabbat, the face of Shabbat, let us receive. So I said this already, that in relationship to God, we're the feminine, and God is the masculine. In relationship to Eretz Yisrael, we are the masculine, and the land is the feminine. But now we're going to add a new one, Shabbat. Shabbat is the feminine, and we, again, are, as it were, we're like God, we're the masculine. And so look at the words, Lecha Dodi. Lecha is the same letters as Hakol. Kol Bah, everything is in it. Kol Bah, Shabbat. Shabbat is called by two names, Shabbat and the seventh day, Yom HaShvi'i. The root of the word Shvi'i is the same root as Saveya, satisfied. So I learned I would say almost a critical teaching from Rav Ginsburg. It's a very simple teaching, but it can change your whole Shabbat. He said the secret of Shabbat is you have to go into Shabbat satisfied with who you are and what your life is all about. If not, you can never really receive the Shabbat on the level that we should be able to. Again, the word Shvi'i comes from the same word as being satisfied. Like we said, V'yachalta v'savata uvarachta. You shall eat and you shall be satisfied and you shall bless. So the blessing is Shabbat. So in other words, when we say, let us go and my beloved, it's the same letters as Kala and Hakol. So what I wanted to, and before I end, another pearl of an idea. This is from the Slonim Rebbe. When God said to Avram, go to the land Asher Areka, to the land that I will show you. So the Slonim Rebbe pointed out that the Gematria of Areka, the Aleph is 1, the Resh is 200, and when you give a special Gematria to the 5 final letters, which are called Mansepach, so the Chaf equals 500. The Mem is 600, the Nun is 700, the Pei is 800, and the Tzadi is 900. And so on occasion, instead of, usually if it's a Chaf, it's 20. But when you do the last letters, it's 500. So the Slonim Rebbe pointed out that Areka is Gematria 702, 2 equals Shabbat. 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 2 equals And so he says a whole Torah that the land that God is showing us in a certain context is what we'll call the land of Shabbos. That is the ultimate thing, because we say after Mashiach comes, our prayer is that we will have a reality called Yom Shekulo Shabbos, a time that is all Shabbat. And so when God shows Avram Eretz Yisrael, I'm taking you to the land. I'm going to show you Sof Ma'aseh B'Machshava Techila. The end of the deed is already there in the beginning. You're going to be you're the first Jew going to Eretz Yisrael. But in the end, Eretz Yisrael is going to spread to the entire world. The little that holds a lot is waiting for that. The little that holds a lot is meant to actually spread to the entire world, physically and spiritually. So that's what they say, that the holiness of the land of Israel will spread to all of the lands. But obviously it's connected that the teaching of one God and the teachings of all the prophets, that when Mashiach comes, there will be peace and harmony between all peoples. So this is the Sof Ma'aseh B'Machshava Techila. This is the ultimate purpose of creation. So admittedly, these are very deep ideas. There is a lot to contemplate here. And starting next week, we will, in a certain way, be kind of like bringing it back down to the actual physical dimension of Eretz Yisrael. But I felt it was important to have the spiritual understanding of really the deep spiritual potential within the physical. That's what we learned tonight. In a deep way, when we say the Ein Sof, the Ein is in the Sof. The spiritual is in the physical. And that's why, except for a handful of mitzvot, all of the mitzvot have to do with a physical action, a physical object, or speech. And speech is considered an action. It all has to do with interrelating to the physical world that we live in. Not to keep it all mental. That we act in the world. We do mitzvot in the world with physical objects and physical actions. Is because Kol Bah, or as the sages say, Ha'ma'aseh hu ha'ikar. The action is the main thing. Not just thinking about it, but the doing of it is the main thing. Now, it goes without saying, to do without thinking is not ideal. Obviously, the ideal is that we translate our deepest thoughts. This is what's called kavanah. We take our deepest intentions and we put them into our physical acts. That's the essence of doing mitzvot. And there's even an opinion that when we're in exile, we are doing mitzvot only to remind us or keep us tuned in to the fact that the main place to do mitzvot is in Eretz Yisrael. That's why last week's parsha was Yitro, and we received the 10 Commandments. And we think, oh, that's the pinnacle. That's the pinnacle. But the pinnacle is taking the Torah into the land of Israel and creating a Torah society in the land, and especially based around the actual mitzvot of Eretz Yisrael. Mitzvot tuluyot ba'aretz, and as we said before, that's why Moshe wanted to come into the land, because he wanted to sink his whole being into the physical land. This is the same Moshe Rabbeinu who spent 40 days with God in heaven. However, we understand that. But Moshe was on a completely different plane, and it wasn't just 40 days. He spent 3 periods of 40 days. This is the same Moshe Rabbeinu who brings the Torah down from heaven, who spoke to God face to face, but he wants to come into Eretz Yisrael so he can keep the physical mitzvot of the land. So that is the ultimate of na'ud sofan b'techilatan b'sofan. Of the end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning in the end. So we should all be blessed to have this consciousness of Eretz Yisrael. I'll end with because many people who are watching, who will be watching, do not live in Israel. So once there was a man who came to the 3rd Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and wanted a blessing to come to Eretz Yisrael. In those days, hardly any Jew lived in Eretz Yisrael. It was incredibly hard, and it was incredibly dangerous even to get here. But nonetheless, Chabad had representatives in Israel. But for whatever reason, the Tzemach Tzedek told him, it's not meant for you to go to Eretz Yisrael right now. The man was very, very disappointed. So the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, make Eretz Yisrael here. In other words, if your consciousness is an Eretz Yisrael consciousness, so make it happen here, even outside of Israel. So I want to bless all of us with the consciousness of Eretz Yisrael. Avira de Eretz Yisrael machin. The air of Eretz Yisrael makes us wise.